in every culture that buries their dead, there's some kind of reanimated corpse monster. I think because, of course, what happens after death is a mystery, and that we like to, again, fill in the blanks of our imagination and try to make sense of the world around us by telling stories, and monsters are part of that story.
Could you kind of sum up the history and what this monster has meant? I know that's kind of a big thing, but vampires.
What I think a lot of people forget about vampires is that these creatures, again, a reanimated corpse that somehow preys on the life force of a human, has been around for thousands and thousands of years, if not millennia, which is crazy to think about. But what we recognize today as a vampire really only started when, alongside literature and the printing industry, where people started going around to these small communities and taking these legends and writing them down. And then those books would then be distributed, and even translated and distributed. And we see the vampire really come into the like Byronic anti-hero or demon lover trope in the 19th century, along with the rise of Gothic literature, for one thing. And then, of course, vampires look really cool on film. So we have some early vampire movies pop up in the 20th century as well. And I hate to say it because it's a cliche, but the vampire never dies. We've basically consistently seen some kind of vampire fiction for hundreds of years now, and I don't think that's happening anytime soon. In terms of what it means, I think it means different things depending on the characteristics of the vampire, including things like gender, and race and age of the vampires for sure. But for me, vampires are about consumption and corruption. Unlike many other monsters, there's, at least in European folklore, the idea that a vampire can turn a living human into a vampire as well. And I think that this idea that we're all, one bite and one heartbeat away from turning into a monster can be both terrifying but also exciting, I think, for some people. There's a form of escapism, I think, in imagining ourselves as monsters, or at least open to that. And while I think horror as a whole is cathartic, it's not just to scare people, in my opinion, I do think that we like to be entertained. And vampires look more like us, I think, than some of the other monsters out there. So it's easier for us to transcribe meaning onto them.
Frankenstein.
The question when I teach Frankenstein that always emerges is who's the real monster in Frankenstein? Because the idea of Dr. Frankenstein, and I'm putting that in air quotes because in Mary Shelley's original text, he's not actually a physician or even a philosopher. He drops out of college. Fun fact. He's more of a natural philosopher, or what we recognize as a scientist. I think so. Is it Frankenstein who's the monster, or is it his creation, the creature, who's the monster? And I think that that's a really one of the reasons that Mary Shelley's creation has been so enduring, is that it's easy to cast both creator and creation as monstrous. And I think, again, that's another allegory we can put onto many different things, and questions about science creating things that we don't understand, or art for art's sake. What is beautiful? How should we be treating our creations? I think those are really interesting as well. But of course, Mary Shelley paved the way for science fiction. And I think that science fiction has always been very futuristically speculative. There are instances in science fiction that people like to say have predicted like real things and real technologies that actually happen. So I think that for Frankenstein, we see revivals of Frankenstein and Frankenstein's creature repeatedly since that original publication. And I think, again, that's because technology keeps advancing. So the Frankenstein and Frankenstein's creature is a really easy way to talk about potentially the dangers of technology and things like religion and procreation in lots of different ways. My favorite example, though, of Frankenstein and Frankenstein's creature actually comes from the show Penny Dreadful. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
I can't watch anything scary. Like if it's above
Okay.
animation, it's too scary for me.
Okay. I'd say it's more spooky than scary, but obviously I'm coming from a completely different mindset. But Frankenstein is portrayed in that film, I think, really accurately to Shelley's original character. And I think personally, it's the most accurate representation of the creature, both in appearance and in personality. We have the black hair, the yellow eyes, the black lips, but Caliban is the name of what the creature names itself in the show, is also incredibly sensitive and kind, and really just trying to find connection in the world. And when that backfires, That's when he sort of really goes on his rampage and, swears to destroy everything that Frankenstein cares about, which is essentially the true novel, not, the lumbering bolts in the neck kind of Frankenstein. So I'm partial. If anyone's a fan of Frankenstein and Frankenstein's creature out there, I'd say definitely check out the Penny Dreadful series, or at least just those episodes.
Is there a main zombie, or zombies has always just been a plural thing?
Ooh, zombie has always been plural in the sense that zombie, ZOMBI, actually emerges. We can connect that monster directly to the transatlantic slave trade. There were some older spiritual practices in parts of Africa about sort of soul stealing or soul control, but it's the zombie as a concept solidified in Haiti during the slave trade there as both a way for people to find community, for disparate individuals coming from all different backgrounds to sort of have the religion of Voodoo to fall back on, but also zombie was considered a betrayal in the sense that if you were already enslaved bodily in life, what's the worst thing someone in your own community could do to you? Would be to enslave you after death. So when the majority of the enslaved people's population was moved to the US, that's when we see the ZOMBI become the zombie with the E at the end that we more recognize today. So I think that zombies have always had the potential to be plural because the idea of how you create a zombie is a malevolent sorcerer or magical practitioner, spiritual practitioner called a Vokor who takes control over the soul and the body. And I had the privilege of being able to talk to some real Vodou and Voodoo priests and priestesses when I was filming the documentary Exhumed, A History of Zombies for PBS. And I was informed by those individuals that the zombie is very much, I hate to say alive, but alive and well in those spiritual traditions, and that is still something that happens to this day. So do you have the, resurrected, running around, cannibalism zombie in those traditions? No, definitely not, at least from my understanding. But I think zombies as a whole is a really interesting way of tracing modernity, not just looking back to the transatlantic slave trade, but if we see the zombie emerge from the Haitian zombie to the Romero zombie to something maybe like the pandemic zombie and what I would call like the hive zombie. As more and more people start to be present on the earth, we see the zombie number go up like extremely. If you've seen a zombie movie in the last like 20 years, you can see this difference, right? You maybe have a couple hundred or like a swarm become a couple thousand. And then I always think of something like World War Z, where you have what appears to be millions of zombies just swarming. And I think, again, overpopulation is something that we can sort of attribute that increase to.